Hello everybody, PokeKid here, and tomorrow is March 20th, the International Day of Happiness. But today we are going to be talking about what to play for States. As I'm recording this, the first day of States is happening, and I've based these lists off of some of my friends who are there. And yeah, at the beginning, I'm going to be talking about the top decks, and then at the end, I'm going to mention a couple of rogues. So the first deck is Size Garantina, which I did an analysis on in my last video. So this deck has a lot of disruption cards, and it's really good against Mega Pokemon because of Garantina's Renegade Pulse. But it loses to Vespiquen because of Seismitoad's weakness. And it also has a bad matchup against Mega Manectric because they can get back their energy, and also they have Jolteon, which makes it so none of these Pokemon can hurt it. And then the next deck is, let's see, Garchomp. It's kind of new because Garchomp is from Breakpoint, and Breakpoint's a new set. So, yeah. Use Bite Off, which does 80 damage but 160 damage to EXs. And you pair that with Fighting Stadium and Strong Energy to one-shot EXs. You only run 2 Gabite because you run 4 Rare Candy, which allows you to automatically go from Gible straight to Garchomp. You run Octillery because you don't run any Shaman, so that's like your way of getting energy. And then Garchomp has a good matchup against Yveltal Gallade, which is another one of the top decks. But it loses to Sceptile, Night March, and Vespiquen. And then also the new Night March Vespiquen deck. So the next deck we're going to be talking about is Mega Sceptile. This deck is really strong. You use Jagged Saber to heal your Pokemon, and you have Ariados to poison them. You run Max Elixir to power stuff up, and you run so many cards to get back energy. This deck is just really, really strong. It beats Garchomp because Garchomp is weak to grass, but it also beats decks that can't one-shot it. It has that massive 220 health, so not a ton of decks can do that. But it has a bad matchup against most decks that can one-shot it. It also has a bad matchup against Entei because you're doing very little damage to it and you have weakness. It also loses to disruption things because this is a pretty linear deck. And some of those disruption decks is like Trevenant or Size Garantina, not as much Size Garantina though. So next we have Mega Manectric. Now, normally we would have two of these Raikus would be 2 Jolteon, but I don't have Jolteon here, so we'll just have to stick with Raikou. So use Turbo Bolt to power up your attackers. You run 4 Max Elixir, which is really good to power up your Pokemon, and you run a lot of energy. Those 2 DCE could become Flash Energy, but for now I feel that they're good as DCE because you can attach one to Hoopa to retreat him or one to Raikou. It has a fairly good matchup against Trevenant and Toadina, which is one of the top decks. But it has a bad matchup against Night March and Vespiquen. And then now, the next deck we're going to talk about is Night March. This is another one of those really strong decks that's really fast-paced. You run Gallade, which is one of the newest additions to it. And you use Promotion. How do you pronounce that? Premontian, whatever. And then you also have Sensitive Blade to destroy Manectric. What Premonition does, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and put them back on top in any order. And then you run Pumpkaboo and Joltik, which have Night March, which for the amount of Pokemon with the Night March attack in your discard, this attack does more damage. And you run Lampent, which also has Night March, but you don't run Litwick, because you're not going to attack with Night March with Lampent. You're using Pumpkaboo and Joltik to attack. You run 4 Puzzle of Time to get back your DCE, because you only have 4. And also you can get back some of your other cards. You run Maxie's Hidden Ball Trick, which you can use to get Gallade. And this deck kind of has a good matchup against absolutely everything, which is one of the reasons why this is so good, because it one-shots everything. But the thing is, it has a bad matchup against everything. If this deck can't get set up, it loses. So this deck is very, very interesting in the way where it kind of beats everything, but it kind of loses to everything. And now we have Yveltal Gallade. This deck is also pretty good. And you run Yveltal EX, and you run Yveltal with Oblivion Wing to power up your Pokemon. And then you also run this Yveltal, which has Fright Night. As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, each Pokemon tool card in play has no effect. And then sometimes you'll attack with Pitch Black Spear, which for 60 damage, it does 60 damage, and then it does 60 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon EX. And that's really good for sniping Shaman. You run Zoroark, which has stand-in, which is like Keldeo's Russian. And you also run that beautiful Gallade that has Premonition. And then you run Maxie's. You also run one Seismitoad, which is really helpful for item locking your opponent. You also run Parallel City and Reverse Valley. Reverse Valley makes your dark Pokemon do 10 more damage. This deck beats Trevenant and Size Garantina. It beats Trevenant because Trevenant has weakness, of course, and Size Garantina because Size Garantina just can't keep up with the deck. It also loses to Manectric decks because of Yveltal's weakness to Manectric, and also non-EX decks. And finally, we have Manectric Bats. This deck is a pretty good deck also. You don't necessarily run Muscle Band. You could also run Fighting Fury Belt or Bursting Balloon. What Bursting Balloon does is, here, I'll just show you right here. If this card, it's a tool. If the Pokemon this card is attached to is your active Pokemon and is damaged by an opponent's attack, even if that Pokemon is knocked out, put 6 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So, it's a really good card. You run 3 Manectric. You could run 4. You run a 4-4-3 line of bats. You run 2 Silent Lab. You could make those 3 DCE become 4 and this down to 6, but I like it this way. And now I'm going to talk about some of the new rogue decks. For instance, there's Trevenant, which you have Trevenant Break with Silent Fear, and you have Trevenant with Forest Curse. And you also, I don't have this deck built, but there's Greninja, which has Giant Shuriken, which does 60 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon if you discard a water energy from your hand. There is also Mega Mewtwo. This is an old list, but I just want to give you the gist. So there are 2 Mega Mewtwo's, Psychic Infinity. And there's Vanishing Strike. And there's Entei, which with Entei you can like power up. You use its attack, and you have Blacksmith, and its attack makes it so it takes less damage. And then you also have Groudon, and I can show you Groudon right here. Groudon. It has Primal Groudon. Gaia Volcano. 100 damage. 100 plus. If there is any stadium card in play, this attack does 100 more damage. Discard that stadium card. This attack then will do 200 damage. And it has a Mega Barrier, which stops disruption stuff. This deck is one of my favorite decks. It's super strong. And that's kind of the top decks. And I think one of the best decks is the Mega Manectric. You just really need those two of those Raikou to become Jolteon. But I feel right now for states, this is one of the strongest decks there is. So, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.